Night envelops a California home with an unsettling calm. Rumors about the friend's trans identity simmer beneath strained smiles, intensifying with every pause. In mere moments, suspicion will spark a destructive force, twisting what was once a safe circle into a savage betrayal. Will empathy prevail before tragedy unfolds, or is this suburban evening already headed toward an irreversible horror? Welcome to True Crime Acts, where we reveal dark truths concealed by the ordinary. In this episode, we examine how silent tension and unchecked bias erupted into a nightmare that none could have predicted. If you find our investigations urgent and illuminating, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay connected as we continue unveiling stories that challenge our belief in safety and friendship. Night descended on a modest California suburb, its cozy lawns and clean sidewalks masking an unseen turbulence. Three friends, two men and their teenage companion, formed what seemed an unbreakable circle, laughing and trading jokes like any tight-knit group. Unknown to them all, this evening would mark the beginning of a devastating turn. The teenage friend, who identified as transgender yet hadn't fully disclosed this fact, carried a secret that hovered just beneath the surface. Occasionally, the two men offered strange glances or half questions about her background. Nothing overt, yet enough to seed doubts. She sensed their curiosity, but she needed their acceptance, clinging to the fragile sense of belonging they provided. Whispers in their social circles quietly hinted at her being different. She'd handle offhand remarks by changing the subject or smiling through discomfort. Some classmates noticed subtle tension whenever the three were together, like a hush waiting to be broken by the wrong word. Under the glow of a setting sun, the trio sometimes took drives around the block, music turned low. She laughed at their jokes but felt unsettled by the men's measured looks. Late nights left her anxious, checking her phone for any sign they'd discovered her truth. Could simple honesty have saved her from the mounting suspicion behind those forced smiles, or was destiny already steering them toward a tragedy no one foresaw? Let us know in the comments if you think small steps of transparency might prevent future heartbreak, or if the seeds of mistrust were already too deep to uproot. A few days later, the group found themselves at a crowded fast food spot after school, munching on fries in uneasy silence. She tried sparking conversation about local gossip or weekend plans, but the two men gave half answers, eyes flicking toward one another as if trying to read each other's next move. A friend passing by paused, studied them with concern, then left quietly. Tension spiked when one man abruptly recalled a story she told months ago, comparing it to a detail she'd mentioned the day before. The disparity, though minor, felt like a crack in her carefully guarded story. She improvised a flustered explanation, her heart pounding. The men left the diner soon after, and she lingered behind, gathering trash with shaky hands. Outside, the two men quietly agreed that something crucial was off. One insisted she owed them truth if they were truly friends. The other mumbled about feeling tricked. Meanwhile, she took the bus home, unsettled by that confrontation. She confided in a longtime confidant that night, admitting the men might suspect her trans identity. The confidant urged her to be honest before mistrust devoured them. Yet she dreaded exposing herself to condemnation. Could direct confession at this stage have rebuilt trust? Or would it merely confirm the men's worst assumptions about her deception? Let us know if you believe a bold, honest dialogue might dissolve suspicion before it reaches the brink, or if fear typically overrides any chance of understanding in such tenuous circumstances. By midweek, the strain became palpable to anyone observing. One of the men had grown visibly irritable, snapping at minor inconveniences. The other adopted an almost analytical stance, carefully analyzing her every comment. Students who'd once seen them as a cohesive unit now suspected discord. She recognized the shift from casual banter to suspicious cross-examination. That evening, she sought refuge in an online forum for LGBTQ youth, posting anonymously about her fear that her close friends might turn hostile if they confirmed her trans status. Some users urged her to find safe allies, but she reasoned she couldn't lose them. Not now. Not when acceptance felt so scarce. The men, for their part, huddled in private text threads. They fed each other's anger, building a narrative that they'd been tricked or humiliated. Their sense of betrayal overshadowed any empathy for her, forging a menacing alliance fueled by wounded pride. One evening, they cornered her by the lockers after school, pressing her for details about her family life. She mumbled disjointed replies, her gaze skittish, glancing at passing students in silent plea for a friendly face. She gave them an excuse, promising she'd explain soon, if they'd just trust her for a bit longer. But they turned and walked away, leaving her trembling. Had a final opportunity for open-hearted conversation flickered in that hallway? Could someone intervening, an adult, a friend, have diffused the looming catastrophe if they'd recognized fear in her eyes? Let us know in the comments if you've ever suspected a tense situation teetering on the edge, and whether quick intervention can shift a fate otherwise bound for disaster. Weekend arrived. She grasped for normalcy, proposing a casual hangout at a local gaming arcade, hoping to reignite some spark of friendship. They arrived together but looked uneasy. Moments of forced laughter between rounds of skee-ball or shooting simulators felt hollow. Amid the flashing screens and chattering arcade patrons, the men confronted her. One blurted, "We know you're not telling us everything. Are you actually trans?" She froze, taken aback. Nervous glances from nearby gamers flitted their way. She attempted a deflection. "It's not what you think," but they demanded clarity, pressing closer. Sensing potential humiliation in public, she insisted they step outside. Standing near an illuminated marquee sign, she admitted yes, she was trans. She explained that she had tried to protect herself from prejudice, never meaning to hurt them. For a moment, they just stared, shock etched in their features. Then anger flared, fueled by the sense they'd been deceived. She pleaded with them to see her still as the same friend. But one spat, "You lied to us," while the other snapped that she'd been messing with their heads. She attempted to calm them, voice trembling under the neon glow that pulsed across the pavement. They asked how far her lies went, making jabs about her body. She, choking on tears, insisted she never toyed with their feelings, only feared their possible rejection. Confrontation threatened to erupt again when a passing group of teens gave them curious looks. The men, muttering curses, stomped off to their car, leaving her alone, heart thudding painfully in her chest. Was that partial admission enough to salvage trust? Or had confirming their suspicions simply rekindled the spark that would soon ignite a lethal blaze of resentment? Let us know if you think she did the right thing by revealing her truth, or if circumstances demanded a different approach entirely. In the days following the arcade standoff, tension escalated with frightening speed. Online chatter among classmates hinted the two men felt humiliated, with some overhearing them vow payback. She, unsure whether this was idle talk or real threat, increasingly dreaded crossing paths with them. A mutual acquaintance recounted that the men just can't get over the fact she lied, hearing them call her a freak when they assumed no one was listening. Meanwhile, she told a confidant her attempts at apology were met with stony silence or curt messages. Fear mingled with heartbreak. These had been her dearest friends, yet now they spat venom behind her back, labeling her entire trans identity a sick trick. Classmates shrugged it off as teenage drama, never guessing the men's frustration could become lethal. She weighed whether to approach a counselor but hesitated, uncertain how to articulate a dread that felt intangible. She couldn't shake the sense that ignoring them might blow over their anger. Her teacher, noticing her focus slipping, gently asked if all was okay. She mustered a weak smile, nodding in false reassurance. That weekend, she received a text from them, oddly friendly on the surface, suggesting they meet at an out-of-the-way spot for closure. Her stomach dropped upon reading it. Realizing how cornered she felt, she confided in one friend, who cautioned her not to go. But she reasoned maybe the men had found acceptance or were willing to bury the hatchet. She typed a hesitant yes, setting the stage for what she prayed would be a peaceful talk. Was her faith in their potential acceptance an act of courage or a tragic miscalculation? Tell us in the comments. Do you think the hope of reclaiming trust outweighs the risk when hostility simmers just beneath the surface? Or should one trust instinct that signals danger is close at hand? She arrived at the dimly lit meeting spot, an abandoned lot at the fringe of town. Something in the chill night air made her shiver, though the men greeted her with subdued politeness. For a moment, flickers of old friendship surfaced in a stilted attempt at conversation. When the men pressed her on specifics, why she hadn't come clean from the start, she haltingly tried to explain. She spoke of fear, the trauma from prior rejections, and how she truly valued their bond. But each sentence seemed to inflame them further, as though every word confirmed their twisted belief they'd been tricked. One slammed a fist into his palm, muttering curses, while the other demanded she admit how far her charade went. Tension spiked beyond reclaim. With no onlookers around, their anger erupted. They shoved her, ignoring her tearful pleas for calm. The first blow landed, a savage echo in the deserted lot. She staggered, arms raised instinctively, voice trembling as she begged them to see reason. Instead, their fury rolled unchecked, pounding her with insults about her trans identity, calling her a fraud. She felt her world spinning out of control. Then, they dragged her to a secluded corner beyond the streetlight's direct beam, where they forced themselves on her, turning hatred into a nightmarish assault. The harrowing screams she unleashed were swallowed by the darkness, no passing cars to intervene. When their anger reached its cruel crescendo, they ended her life in a final act of sheer brutality. A hush followed, more dreadful than any shout. They stared at her lifeless form, too shocked to comprehend how they'd crossed every boundary of decency, let alone friendship. Was there ever a path in that moment for empathy to reawaken humanity? Or had their hate-fueled betrayal sealed her fate the instant suspicion took hold? At dawn, a jogger passed the abandoned lot, nearly turning away at the eerie quiet. Catching a glimpse of something on the ground, he approached with growing dread. The sight of her beaten body sent him reeling, phone trembling in hand as he dialed 911. Officers soon flooded the area, cordoning off the asphalt with bright yellow tape. Forensic investigators stepped carefully around scattered clues, footprints pressed into dusty corners, spattered stains across the concrete, torn scraps of fabric. The deeper they delved, the more apparent it became that she'd suffered a vicious assault. One not motivated by theft or random violence, but by a deeper, uglier prejudice. As news of the murder spread, heartbreak racked the local LGBTQ community. Old yearbook photos of her circulated on social media, accompanied by messages recalling her kindness, her quiet resilience. A wave of outrage followed when rumors hinted the prime suspects were her closest friends. Could betrayal truly run so deep that childhood bonds and inside jokes ended in lethal rage? Let us know your thoughts. Can a single revelation about identity dissolve years of affection into unbridled brutality? Detectives pieced together final phone logs, noting her last text, "Heading there now, see you soon." That message pointed them directly to the men's involvement, along with other testimonies about their rising hostility. Although neither suspect confessed immediately, it wasn't long before forensic evidence locked them to the scene. The illusions they'd present to an unwary public about her deceiving them were overshadowed by the savage methods used in the killing. Still, the haunting question remained. Did they plan the final assault from the start? Or did a moment of fury spiral beyond any rational boundary? The difference might weigh on the eventual charges, but for all who knew her, the outcome was the same. A life ended by a lethal blend of prejudice and personal resentment. Officers, hardened by experience, quietly admitted it was among the most disturbing crimes they'd encountered, a testament to the depths that fear and ignorance can reach. The subsequent arrest of the two men provoked a community-wide wave of disbelief. A swirl of local media trucks parked outside the station, trying to capture every detail of the men's arraignment. They were charged with murder, aggravated by hate crime stipulations tied to the victim's trans identity. At the courthouse, reporters clustered around grieving friends of the victim, who held hastily made signs calling for justice. One activist stepped forward, demanding that society acknowledge how transphobia, combined with personal grudges, can spark monstrous violence. Some news outlets sensationalized the notion of trans deception, a narrative the men's defense toyed with, claiming a wave of emotional shock led them astray. But among the outraged voices, many insisted no confusion could justify such thorough brutality. During pre-trial hearings, each suspect tried to deflect blame onto the other, each contending that the final acts were not fully planned. Yet phone records, eyewitness testimonies about their growing resentment, and the chilling autopsy findings told a story of unbridled aggression that went far beyond any spur-of-the-moment spree. Friends of the victim recalled her shy smiles, her anxiety about whether her trans identity might alienate those she cared about. One recounted a conversation weeks before her death. She'd worried about not being able to keep up a front forever. That fear had come to pass. The men, in their anger, rationalized that her not fully disclosing her status was an unforgivable betrayal, overlooking the glaring fact that deception cannot equate with murder. Do you think stronger community education around transgender issues might have steered the men toward empathy instead of hostility? Or do personal prejudices sometimes run too deep to be quelled by mere information? As the legal proceedings loomed, only one certainty remained. The court would soon weigh the evidence and deliver a verdict on whether they would ever again walk free. Once the trial began, it transfixed the town. Prosecutors laid out the narrative of rising suspicion turned lethal, bolstered by forensic proof that the men orchestrated a brutal assault. Harrowing details of sexual violence underscored the hateful intent, leaving many in the jury visibly shaken. Defense attorneys struggled to spin the story, invoking claims of emotional distress and confusion. They argued that the men felt misled, flipping from misguided teenage love to anger, though how that could culminate in homicide and rape confounded most observers. Investigators recounted her final hours, painting a stark image of betrayal from those she considered her dearest confidants. Testimonies from teachers, acquaintances, and even school staff depicted her as sensitive, eager to belong in a world rarely kind to trans youth. Some broke down on the stand, remembering small joys she brought to classmates. The men's prior text exchanges, read in court, exposed seething resentment in lines like, "She's messing with us." The jury heard them debate, teaching her a lesson, proving the savage night was no simple accident. Outside, activists held vigil. A swirl of newscasters reported daily developments, sometimes fueling misguided angles about trans identity. Allies in the stands fumed at how the defense flirted with victim blaming, feeding transphobic tropes. They insisted the facts were plain. No identity revelation ever warrants barbaric assault. Do you think it's vital for courts to treat hate-motivated crimes with special weight, or should all acts of homicide carry the same condemnation regardless of motive? Share your opinions in the comment section below. For the town, the question mattered little. They yearned to see a measure of justice for a life ended so tragically at the hands of individuals who once claimed to share her circle of trust and affection. The final day of the trial arrived, tension clinging to every bench in the courtroom. When the guilty verdict for murder and aggravated hate crime rang out, scattered sobs of relief and heartbreak merged. The judge's voice trembled as sentencing was pronounced, life without parole. The two men, once companions in everything from silly pranks to heartbreak confessions, now faced a future behind bars, sealed by a single night of ghastly violence. Afterward, a press conference held outside saw the victim's family, voice trembling, address the tragedy. They urged society to see beyond sensational headlines, to realize that bigotry and personal fear can spark catastrophic actions if left unchecked. Supporters wore badges of rainbow ribbons, tears shining under midday sun, while reporters peppered questions about whether such a verdict sent a loud enough message. Some in the crowd held signs reading, "No excuse for hate," reaffirming that discovering a friend's trans identity should never devolve into atrocity. In the weeks that followed, the story waned from mainstream view, but not from the hearts of those who cherished her memory. Vigils continued, small gatherings, ensuring her name wouldn't be forgotten. Plans for a scholarship in her name took shape, aimed at supporting trans youth and fostering education on gender identity. People wondered what fleeting moments might have halted the men's descent. Had a teacher or counselor recognized their hostility, or had one honest conversation occurred sooner? Do you believe consistent education and community support can reduce these tragic betrayals, or are personal prejudices often too entrenched for outside influence to stop? Ultimately, this tragedy stands as a dire warning that when identity meets ignorance and suspicion meets personal grudges, even the most innocent circle of friends can unravel into something unfathomably cruel. Night returns to the neighborhood where all seemed normal, yet a grave loss lingers in every shadow. People pause briefly as they pass, quietly remembering how a spark of distrust and intolerance spiraled into heartbreak. Friends and strangers alike have left notes pleading for compassion and understanding, hoping no one else falls victim to a similar tragedy. Here at True Crime Acts, we believe the path to justice does not end when a verdict is handed down. If this story stirred questions about empathy, identity, or the power of unchecked fear, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay connected. We encourage you to share your perspectives below, because when we confront these accounts as a community, we may yet ensure that no more lives are lost to the dark forces of hatred and betrayal.